Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Never before in the history of sports podcasts have two men brought you opinion and analysis like these two. They speak for a city that's desperate for wins and titles, not whining and travesty. You might not agree with what they have to say, but you'll defend their right to say it. Sports fans across the world, from Chicago, Illinois, this is the Mac and Reed Show.
What's happening, everybody? Good evening. Welcome into another edition of the Mac and Reed Show here on the Barroom Network. Follow at Barroom Network for all the Bears news and sports updates you need in your life. Follow them on Twitter, of course, and we are streaming live on YouTube right now. If you've missed any of our previous shows, they're also up on YouTube on the Barroom Network channel, and of course, the audio-only formats are on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your audio. Go ahead, like, subscribe, tell a friend or two. Follow me at the Real Evan Mac on Twitter. Some people are calling it X. The young kids are calling it that. Ross calls something else X. And then Ross Reed is at Ross Reed on Twitter. How are you, sir?
I'm good. If you were born in the 80s and 90s, X meant something completely different.
Something real different than Twitter. Kids like, hey, gonna be on X tonight, all night. Yeah. Like, what? Very different. We have a very different definition. We have a lot to get to on the show this evening. The Bears cutting their roster up to 53 men, and still a lot of moving around as that roster itself is getting tweaked with 53 men on the roster. And then, of course, the practice squad, going over that. We'll go over preseason conclusions after 3 preseason games and some limited starter action, but some reserves, some looks at the rookies, go over all of that in depth over the first half or so of the show. And then also dedicate a lot of time to the division predictions as we go around the league. Some divisions obviously a lot more competitive than others, some clear-cut favorites, some not so clear-cut favorites. So Ross and I will go back and forth about that and some surprises along the way, of course. But to begin, well, let's talk about it. The Bears came to their 53-man roster. As of today, it's still in flux as there's still news coming out. I think the latest move now where someone will be a casualty to that 53-man roster was getting some special teams help as the Bengals surprisingly waived Trent Taylor and the Bears want to pick him up. But, looking at the roster itself, I'd say to start, we can talk right away about it is the quarterback position, because we certainly thought that PJ Walker was going to be that shoo-in for backup behind Justin Fields. We know that Justin Fields is that dude as number one for a good reason. Maybe Nathan Peterman would sneak up there, but you really didn't think that Tyson Bagent would sneak in there, and he played very well in the preseason. Certainly fits in that type of Justin Fields mold where you saw him run a lot. You could see he can throw on the run, and it would open up some interesting play calling opportunities. I think now looking ahead, since he's going to be behind Justin Fields, why not use him? I don't know, like a Taysom Hill type of guy too, if you think about that, or Wildcat scenarios, what have you, but have some creativity if need be. And then, it's a pretty solid backup, obviously unproven at this point, but very good college career. It was nice. What do you think? We'll start with that before we dive into the rest of the roster, Ross, but his performance and then, the move to promote him to the backup quarterback behind Justin Fields.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, listen, you want a quarterback with a similar skill set to your starter, and that's what he brings to the table. Number one, he's a very athletic young man. He's highly successful. The guy's throwing for a crazy amount of yards in college. Granted, he comes from a small school, but, the production that was there in college. What I liked the most about what he did in the preseason is he was able to pick up the offense very quickly. The ball was really coming out of his hands really quickly and decisively. So I think that if he did have to see meaningful time, heaven forbid, He would be able to at least get those quick throws out of his hands, very much similar to another guy that was he didn't go undrafted, but Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant, practically undrafted. And he was able to get the football out of his hands pretty quickly and get it to his playmakers and allow them to make plays, right? So what I like also about it is, when you start bringing in these older retread backups and stuff like that, there's no high ceiling to these guys. There's no, to me, regardless of the quarterback that you have as your starter, you should be able to still take as many swings as possible at the position. That's the old Mike Holmgren Green Bay way, which is how they were able to get Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Hasselbeck, Matt Flynn, right? I can go on and on. They just had guys going through their system constantly that were decent quarterbacks. Two guys are going to be Hall of Famers. A couple guys, Matt Hasselbeck started in a Super Bowl. And, we know what Matt Flynn, what he did. He was signed to that big contract before Russell Wilson ultimately took him out. So I like the move. I like being able to develop another young player in the similar skill set of Justin Fields. And, the Bears have yet to get this quarterback position rock solid, to me, ever in franchise history. So you take as many swings as possible at it on young players until you really lock it down. And hopefully, knock on wood, the Bears have two solid quarterbacks going forward. Obviously, Justin Fields, hopefully he turns into a star. And Tyson Badgett being a good, solid backup.
Yeah, Badgett, 23 years old, an undrafted rookie, but like we talked about at length, really played well in college and played his butt off in the preseason to make it onto the roster and outplay a guy like PJ Walker and Nathan Peterman, who are both pretty competent, as my daughter's yelling at me, competent enough backup quarterbacks who can hold the clipboard. And God forbid something happens to Justin Fields, he looks like he could step up nicely. Now, looking at the rest of the roster cuts for 53-man changes, I should say, the running back position, to keep all the running backs in play was pretty surprising, I think, looking at the offensive side of the ball to start here. But we've made cases for all of these guys, right? You knew that Khalil Herbert would be making the team. You knew that that certainly Devontae Foreman, he saw some limited availability in this preseason, but you also know what he was able to do last year in Carolina with the departure of Christian McCaffrey. The rookie Roshan Johnson provides good depth. And if you see him on special teams and maybe taking some carries, I'd be all for that. And of course, you're going to keep a fullback in there and Travis Homer. And so wide receivers, not too many surprises there. Obviously DJ Moore. And speaking of, tying it all into the preseason and performances there, DJ Moore is that dude in just limited action that we saw. Every time he caught the ball, it was like a 50-yard average. It was pretty incredible what he was able to do in very limited action with the one. So you can't wait to see what he'll be able to do with Justin Fields throwing to him. You're not sure what you're getting in Chase Claypool, obviously, with him not playing any of the preseason, but and limited action last year. But you knew that he was locked in as that number two option, basically number 2-3 besides Darnell Mooney for Justin Fields. We talked about Velus Jones Jr. His making the roster being in jeopardy, certainly being mostly a special teams guy, and now Trent Taylor. You wonder what'll happen to Velus Jones. He's got to be real nervous with this signing of Trent Taylor at this point, who was averaging, close to 11 yards a punt return last year. And then, of course, the offensive line. We know a lot of questions about that depth, and we really we're certainly worried about the Tevin Jenkins news, which we didn't get to discuss last week, as he was put on IR and is now listed week to week. Other than that, again, knock on wood, the Bears as a whole look healthy on paper outside of that. And they did add some depth on the offensive line by going ahead and signing Orland Park native and Dan Feeney, who he's a veteran offensive tackle, has some versatility working inside. He's played as Poles and Eberflus said he can play all three of the interior positions as well as offensive tackle. But thoughts on that offense and how it shaped out, if there were any surprises, or what your general thoughts were, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, the surprise to me is Jones being still on the roster, in my opinion, because if he's not going to return punts for you, and you have a guy like a rookie in Tyler Scott, I don't know what he brings to the table. A lot of people told me today, well, he could be a gadget guy. He can run jet sweeps and things of that nature. But when he steps on the field and you know that that's all he can really do, you become very predictable with his role out in that field, which is exactly what you don't want to do. NFL defenses are very, very smart. They can pick up on these things right away. So that's something to keep an eye on. We know that this 53-man roster is fluid. It could change. It could fluctuate. But it sounds like Ryan Poles told you today Trent Taylor is going to be your starting punt returner, and he can provide some things on offense too as a slot receiver. And he's a very good punt returner. He's got Pro Bowl caliber punt returner. And Jones could battle for Tyler Scott for the kickoff spot. Jones Jr. was a decent kickoff guy, return guy in college. So he deserves that opportunity there. But if he can't do that, I'm not sure what he brings to the table. And then the offensive line is the thing that we're just going to constantly keep an eye on throughout the season, right? Luckily, we've got two young bookend tackles that we feel good about, Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright was back in practice today. He looks fine after they had that ankle scare last week. It's the interior part of that line that you start to worry about. And, you talked about Tevin Jenkins. And, I feel for this young man because I really like him a lot as a football player. But a big part of how good of a football player you are is availability. He just has not been available throughout his career as a Bear. I think I read something today. He's only finished 6 games that he started. Finished 6 games that he started in his entire career. And unfortunately, that's just not going to get it done. When you can't rely on a guy like that, you can't, have him in your mindset that he's going to be in your starting rotation short-term or long-term. He's already out for 4 games this year. We'll see how he comes back. And that's at the hope, that he can play, the rest of the 13 games throughout the season. As of right now, I have my doubts, which I think is why Feely is here, is because I think Ryan Poles realized we have to have Dan Feely out there as a good veteran who can be able to snap the football, move Cody Whitehair to left guard where he's more comfortable at. And I do think that Feely is going to be your starting center week 1 against the Packers. But it would be nice to see Tevin Jenkins get healthy and stay out on the football field consistently, but when he is, he's a really good football player.
Yeah, and I mean, is there any surprise for you, Ross, just touching on the offensive line with Alex Leatherwood and being waived, not making the team? I think it just comes down to claiming, I think it was about 9 offensive line and just claiming the best guys for the job. And obviously, with the signing of Feeney getting in there, I feel like there just wasn't room for Leatherwood. And I mean, he could be a quality backup for another team. But yeah, were you surprised that he didn't make the team?
No, I wasn't surprised. I mean, listen, it didn't work out for him with the Raiders. I think that in the limited snaps that he got in preseason, that left guard, they just didn't feel comfortable enough with him there. He didn't flash enough like he should have out there. Unfortunately, the young man is just a bust. And I hate to put that label on him, but now I know he got picked up by the Browns. I don't see it, for him where he's going to be even a viable rotation guy going forward, So, you wish him best of luck. It didn't work out, which happens sometimes as even for first round picks. So that one wasn't surprising to me. I think the Bears just were not comfortable if they needed to put him out there. Would he be able to take care of Justin Fields and keep him healthy? And if you can't feel comfortable about that, he's got to go.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So, looking at that depth and Ja'Tyre Carter and the way that he's able to slide in there, Doug Kramer, Nate Davis will, obviously be a bit of a question mark as he's missed all of his preseason, but he is a veteran. We know that per Eberflus and company that he will be suited up and starting in week 1. Outside of Tevin Jenkins, how much confidence do you have in this line as we put a pin on that conversation?
I'm still a little worried about it. It still concerns me, in particular, the interior line, just because I don't know what we're getting from Cody Whitehair at this point in his career. He's a little bit older. Nate Davis
and Lucas
doesn't
Patrick.
Nate Davis doesn't like to practice, but you feel pretty good about that. And then Feely, Feely was a guy who came from he before he was with the Dolphins, he also spent some time with the Chargers and was the center for Justin Herbert. And he gave up the most pressures and hurries in the league from the center position. And that concerns you, right? Maybe it was the offense, maybe it was the scheme that they're running. He's got some history with Luke Getsy. They kind of know each other from their past as well. They've worked together. So maybe things will be a little bit different for him. But that concerns me. If that interior rush is coming if that rush is coming from up the middle for Fields, I don't know how he's going to be able to step up into the pocket and deliver the throws that he wants to, right? You want him comfortable in the pocket, especially from that pressure up the middle, or else you're going to keep seeing the same things that we saw last year, him bailing a little bit early and using his legs, which is exactly what we don't want to see.
Yeah. And then not surprising with the tight end position, obviously the guys who are really going to be in heavy rotation, Robert Tonyan, Mercedes Lewis, the old man, and then Cole Kmet making the roster. Switching focus to the defense. I think the only real big surprise, but not surprising just because of the way this depth sort of shook out, was Trevis Gibson playing well enough to make a team probably anywhere else in the league. And I'm not sure where he ended up today or if he was claimed, but he was waived, in lieu of basically the 9 defensive linemen who earned spots. That was Rasheem Green, Terrell Lewis, Yannick Ngakoue, Dominique Robinson, and DeMarcus Walker. On the interior, Andrew Billings, Gervon Dexter Sr., Justin Jones, and Zach Pickens. Gervon Dexter Sr. and Zach Pickens, the rookies. But, with Gibson, he played a good enough preseason. He saw a lot of snaps. I think last year he played in about 11 games, something like that. But I hope he goes to somewhere else because he certainly had shown a lot. It just became a big depth issue, right, Ross?
It really did. And, this was a guy, remember, he wasn't a part of their regime. He wasn't, drafted by them. I think they just didn't feel comfortable with him out there in the run and the pass. And when you start putting these defensive end number 4s out there, number 5s out there, you've got to be able to do a little bit of both. And the same thing happened with Terrell Lewis. We thought that Terrell Lewis was going to be a part of this team as well, and he got released. But he's a very rotational, situational pass rusher. And so when these guys step on the field, and when opposing offenses see them out in the field, knowing that that's your D4 or D5, they know exactly what you're going to do, and they most importantly know how to game plan against you. And that's where you start to factor these things in with the roster. I know a lot of people are like, we should have kept Gibson, we should have kept Lewis. Gibson didn't get claimed on waivers today. Like, he's still out there, right? Yeah. And tomorrow, Terrell Lewis, we'll find out about Terrell Lewis. I promise you, he's probably also not going to get claimed on waivers. These guys are not as highly regarded as you might think that they are in Hallis Hall and around the league. And so I think that a lot of times with us as fans, we get caught up in the minutia and the excitement of seeing the third and fourth quarter of preseason games. But in reality, these guys are fighting for roster spots number 48 through 53. And when you start splitting hairs and arguing about those bottom guys, those guys they come in, they come out. I promise you, over the next 3 to 5 weeks, you're going to see 4 different names rotate in and out of those different roster spots. You could see Trevis Gibson back here at some point, especially if there's an injury situation. I think you might see Terrell Lewis back tomorrow on the practice squad if he clears waivers, and they might drop a guy that they currently have on the practice squad as well. So I don't want to spend too much time on arguing about bottom tier roster guys. These things happen. I saw a stat today that the Bears turned over 50% of their roster from last year. That is a big number. 50% of the guys on this current 53 are brand new to this football team. And so they're going to constantly tweak and tinker and throw some things around. Maybe Green is not the right fit over Gibson. But guess what? If he's not, they can probably cut ties with him a week or 2 later, and Gibson might still be out there.
Yeah, that's pretty major as far as the overhaul that you mentioned, and especially on the defensive line. It's like you said, to start off that conversation, Gibson, playing well, but a holdover from this Ryan Poles. He wasn't drafted by Ryan Poles. It was 17 of 21 players selected in Ryan Poles' first 2 draft classes as Bears general manager earned roster spots, 17 of the 21. So that includes 8 of this year's 10 picks, with the only 2 exceptions being the last two choices from last draft and Travis Bell and Trent Williamson. So, looking at linebackers, and again, no surprises there. You're going to expect a lot out of Noah Sewell, obviously TJ Edwards, and in support of Jack Sanborn, the new well-paid middle linebacker, strong side linebacker, and Tremaine Edmonds. And then defensive backs, really the only casualty of note was a guy like Kendall Vildor who played, in 11 games last year. But any surprises in defensive back? Are you pretty confident? I know with again, tying back to the preseason, we were pretty confident in the ways and impressed by the ways that Tyreek Stevenson played and the young guys in support of those also younger guys, and Kyler Gordon, obviously, and the likes of Jaquan Brisker, of course.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I'm surprised about is them being able to get Quindell Johnson off of waivers today, which I think was a massive, not massive. It was a very good upgrade for them on their depth spot. He's going to come in there. He's going to be a backup safety for them. But he's going to have a big spot on special teams as well. And I think that anytime you can solidify your special teams with a veteran like that, but he also played some meaningful snaps for the Rams, I think that's a very good football player that you can get as your third safety spot, especially because I'm a little bit concerned right now with Brisker. Brisker's still the only big starter that hasn't been able to get out there and practice. Hopefully he can get out there and practice, at some point this week. They said he was on the exercise bike today. They're going to need him out there sooner than later. I'm getting a little worried about him. Outside of that, the secondary fell out, I think, the way that we thought it would be. Your three, top starters at corner are going to be Jalen Johnson. They're going to be Tyreek Stevenson, and they're going to be Kyler Gordon, right? Those guys are going to play. Johnson and Stevenson are going to play outside. Gordon is going to be your nickel guy. And then backing him up, you got your other rookie, Terrell Smith. He's going to be out there as well. And they still kept Jalen Jones and Josh Blackwell, those guys who they're kind of holdovers from before. So for Josh Blackwell, he came from Philadelphia. And then safety spots, assuming Brisker's out there, you got your vets and Eddie Jackson as well. They feel very comfortable with Elijah Hicks. They like him. They feel comfortable with AJ Thomas, and then they just picked up Johnson as well. So I think the secondary is very solid. I like the secondary a lot. The front seven still worries me, right? As we still just trying to figure out where they're going to generate the pass rush. And it was good to see Noah Sewell back there, just jump to linebackers. It was good to see Noah Sewell back out there today practicing as well. And he was banged up last week too.
Yeah, absolutely. It was you held your breath a little bit when he came up lame in the last preseason game of the season. Any surprises for people listening and watching out there? If you're watching on YouTube, you can comment along and talk about it. We're talking about the Bears trimming down to the 53-man roster. Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with the defense. Turnover is pretty key right now because this defense was so bad last year. It was pretty abysmal. And I'm wondering what the pass rush looks like first and foremost. I think the guys that were retained just make obviously the most sense, especially with the youth they have. And then now it's a complete upgrade with the edges and Yannick Ngakoue and DeMarcus Walker. I'm excited to see the interior, that mix of Justin Jones, Zach Pickens, Gervon Dexter, Andrew Billings, a good free agent signing, hopefully. And then linebacker play will be key, right? We saw that Jack Sanborn played pretty well last season, in limited action. It's a question of health for him at this point too. TJ Edwards has some big expectations. Then Tremaine Edmonds should bolster that core right away. But the secondary, I think, does look really solid. And that as you're playing against some pretty high-powered offenses, especially in your division, there's reason to be pretty confident right now. Wouldn't you say, Ross?
I think so. This is all going to be a work in progress. Again, I reiterate again, 50% of this roster is brand new. Look at guys on defense. Even your starters alone. DeMarcus Walker is brand new. Andrew Billingsley is brand new. Yannick Ngakoue is brand new. TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, right? And Tyreek Stevenson. That's a handful of starters right there already brand new on defense. And they're going to have to gel pretty quickly because you get Matt LaFleur in that offense week one. I for one don't think that you should take Jordan Love lightly. He has had a solid preseason. I'll never take a Packers quarterback lightly until you just consistently beat the crap out of them. And then you kind of look around, and I'll be there in Kansas City. Week 3, it's the defending champs, and it's the future Hall of Famer Pat Mahomes in their house. So this defense is going to have to grow up pretty quickly, and hopefully they can find some guys that can really generate a pass rush. That's why you brought in Ngakoue. But they're going to need really from the interior their rookies, Zach Pickens and Gervon Dexter, to really try and generate a pass rush when they're getting on the field, spelling Billings and Justin Jones. And, we'll see. Rasheem Green, he's a guy that has a spotlight on him today because, a lot of Bears fans are harping over the fact that they chose him over Gibson and Lewis. I still think Lewis will be back tomorrow. But so, he's a guy that is going to have to produce pretty early. And if he doesn't, he's probably going to have to hit the bricks too.
So looking at the preseason as a whole, obviously it's more about the backups and guys who are on the fringe making the team. Tyson Bagent, won the preseason as far as going and taking and won his entire last 6 months by just really impressing, coming off a great college career, but impressing. You look at the Senior Bowl when he's meeting with Bears offensive coordinators, and then fast forward to now and playing so well in the preseason, just lighting it up, to overtaking that number 2 quarterback spot is pretty impressive. But just, if you think about the roster as a whole and with these cuts, who else stood out? I know we talked about DJ Moore, but who else stood out for you, Ross?
Yeah, to me, it was, in the limited action, we saw TJ Edwards. I thought he was the best free agent signing that they, pound per pound that they picked up so far this year. I loved the rookie Roschon Johnson as a running back. I think that, he could potentially really eat into the carries of Khalil Herbert as this season goes along. Khalil Herbert's got a big job for him ahead of the season. He is, running back number 1. But that also means that he's going to have to be the number 1 pass protector on the football field. It's something he struggled with, a great deal last season. I think that hopefully he's worked on it this year. He's got a veteran in Foreman to be able to spell him and to help him with that. But it wouldn't shock me at all if I saw Roschon Johnson really start to eat into those carries later on this year and come close to being the running back number 1, because he's got that juice to him. He's very difficult to bring down, after one tackle. And then, Darnell Wright, he's your first round pick. And I really liked how he was stout and be able to hold his own in the limited snaps that he got out there. Obviously, we didn't see a lot from the first team offense. He didn't even play in that 3rd game against the Bills. But I feel very comfortable with him on the right side. I feel very comfortable with him, in the running game in particular. And I think the Bears are going to use him a lot in that fashion early on, just to kind of get him acclimated to the NFL.
Right on. Well, Cliff with the hot take. Bagent, the next future. Hilarious. Welcome to the show, Cliff. We love you. Now it's just about getting ready for Green Bay, right? As we, fast forward ahead to that week 1 matchup. And just, as a pin on the Bears conversation, you can't understate it enough just what a blow it is to lose Tevin Jenkins, now put on IR, not eligible to come back until week 5. So, you're getting Feeney at the right time. Now we'll see some shuffling, right? You're going to see if Feeney starts right away next to, Braxton Jones and Cody Whitehair, Nate Davis and Darnell Wright, a lot of pressure on that line and not a ton of time to prepare now that Tevin Jenkins has departed. So it'll be curious to see, but it's a good turnaround, right? So ready for week 1 against Green Bay. Onward.
We are. And you know what? They're banged up too. They had a couple guys not practice today. Bakhtiari didn't practice today. Romeo Dobbs, stuff like that. A lot of guys are banged up around the league right now. This is the kind of the acclimation period from the off season to hitting for the first time in training camp to a couple preseason games. It's going to be interesting to see those first injury reports come out next week as they start to have to really report these things as we get to lock in on week 1. Right now, the Bears are favored at home, -2. That line could fluctuate depending on how this the situation looks like. To me, the only thing I'm looking at from the Bears on that front, they need to get Jaquan Brisker out there sooner than later. Outside of that, we know that everybody's going to be out there healthy except for Tevin Jenkins. And it's go time. I think Luke Getsy was very vanilla on purpose in that Bills game, especially with that offense, because he didn't want to show too much to anybody. And, they even pulled Justin Fields basically at the goal line, right, on a goal line situation where he could have got a touchdown, but he took a big hit in the mouth from Ed Oliver, and they said, that's enough. We don't need to see you out there anymore. And they let the backup finish the drive there. So I think we're all excited. We're all ready for week 1 to get here. It's been a long time coming, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun on the lakefront. It's like the average ticket right now is like $550 for week 1. It's insane. These are like playoff ticket prices right now for the Packers coming in.
It's bananas. So what, about 11 days till that kickoff, September 10th? Let's go. Let's continue the NFL conversation, as we wanted to focus on this episode about the divisions around the league. And there's been changes at quarterback. We know that, coming off last season, the best teams that finished the NFC and AFC respectively were the Eagles and the Chiefs. Chiefs, the reigning champs, and certainly still look like leaders in their division. But we'll start, of course, in the AFC East with the Bills, the Dolphins, Patriots, and Jets. And talking about biggest moves of the offseason, I don't know if, you'd be hard-pressed to say there was a bigger move than Aaron Rodgers leaving Green Bay and going to the New York Jets. And, as far as division predictions go, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the New York Jets can win that division right away. And now I know that the Bills have been on a tear the last few seasons owning that division, owning the East, but with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, it just completely elevates that roster right away to get a Hall of Famer like him. A much more competent quarterback than a Zach Wilson. A little bit of disrespect to Zach Wilson in there, who was saying, he's going to kick whoever's ass in there. But look at just Breece Hall, who is such a good running back. I know he's coming off a major injury, but having Dalvin Cook able to spell him is, I think, pretty huge. Having Garrett Wilson to throw to, he's going to have his old toys and Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, who are, serviceable weapons, I would say. And then that defense is pretty well put together, I think, with a really good front seven. I think they could turn some heads in the Jets to finally maybe sniff the playoffs and go even further potentially. I see the Jets looking good, winning this division. The double digits wins. It's really going to be indicative how the season's going to go with that opener, though, I think, against the Bills. But that should be really fun. They got a tough first half schedule, but Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, I like them. I like them to win that division. What say you, Ross?
I was going to say they got a brutal schedule this year. Sounds like you're drinking the Hard Knocks Kool-Aid a little bit, which they've been laying on super thick with the Aaron Rodgers love on Hard Knocks this year.
That's from a Bears fan.
Yeah. This is a difficult division. This is a difficult division to call because anytime you got Josh Allen out there, you basically are penciling yourself in for like 10 to 11 wins, right? And I think that the Bills got some serious issues on defense this year. I'm not really sure that their secondary is all that good. Von Miller is starting the season on the PUP list. He's going to be out for a while, for about the first 6 games of the year. And that's tough. If they can't generate a pass rush, we saw what happened to them last year, right? They just were not really able to slow down like the Bengals and stuff like that. And they got knocked off. And so I'm a little bit worried about their defense. And you're putting a lot of pressure on Josh Allen. And with that said, he's a perennial MVP candidate, so he can handle it. The Jets, I like the Jets on paper. I like their defense a lot. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is still a very good quarterback. Not the same Aaron Rodgers he used to be, but he's got some amazing weapons, man. He's got Garrett Wilson out there and Alan Lazard, and he's got 2 very good tight ends. Conklin is a tight end. McCole Hardman's out there, 2 good running backs, and Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. For me, their biggest concern is their offensive line, and are going to be able to keep Aaron Rodgers upright? It's been an issue last year, this year through training camp, this year through preseason. And if they're not going to be able to keep a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers upright and healthy, I don't see how he's going to succeed. The team I like in that division is the Miami Dolphins. And the reason why I like them is because I'm a big fan of their defense. Even without Jalen Ramsey, he's going to be out there. He's not going to be out there for a while. He hurt himself in the offseason. But I love their offense. I love what Mike McDaniel was able to do in calling the plays. obviously for me to pick this, the biggest thing rides on if Tua Tagovailoa can stay healthy, right? Which, I mean, he might be one concussion away from being out for the rest of his career. We just don't know where he's at. But I love their skill players. I love how balanced they are on both sides of the football. And they're sitting like at about plus 430 right now to win that division. They're like third best odds. Only the Patriots have the worst odds. But I think that people are sleeping on on Miami a little too much. And I would actually pick them as surprise to win that division.
It's a tough division, top to bottom. I think, we're not even mentioning in this conversation is Bill Belichick and the Patriots right there, and Dad bod Mac Jones over there. That you figure that Bill Belichick does this every year. He puts together a pretty competitive roster in the very tough division that continues to fluctuate. But as far as Miami, you hit it on the head. Like the only thing that could really derail Miami, you would think, would be if Tua goes out, and then it would be hilarious if Mike White would be named the starter. But bringing back Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, that's just as good a 1-2 punch as any in the league. Really good defensive depth as well. So it'll be interesting to see. But if I'm picking today, again, I think it's the Jets, but the Bills. Obviously Josh Allen is on a mission, and we're talking about the top tiers of quarterbacks. He is way up there for sure. Moving on, let's talk about the AFC North, Ross, and. Between Baltimore, the Bengals, the Browns, the Steelers, again, it's tougher. Certainly no clear-cut favorite besides, you look at the Bengals and Joe Burrow being probably the strongest performing team in the most recent years. But the Ravens are right there with them with the play of Lamar Jackson, and now you think he would take a step in the right direction. With a nice new toy and Odell Beckham Jr., Zay Flowers, the rookie would be one of the best rookie wide receivers out there. They're loaded on defense, as we know. Steelers taking a step in the right direction too. I don't think the Browns. I think the Browns are probably last in this division, but for me, it still is the Bengals. And I know that Joe Burrow took his first snaps today since weeks ago, and there's the injury. I think it's a hamstring. It's a leg injury. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Calf. Yep.
The calf. I was right in the body part. There we go. The lower portion of his body. So a calf injury that he's not that the Bengals are obviously playing close to the chest. They're not really letting people know how serious it is. There are still questions that he will start or not. But even if he doesn't start that first game against the Browns, maybe 1 or 2 games, I still feel like it's their division to lose. They got the best coaching in that division. Joe Burrow is elite, obviously, with Jamar Chase and the company that is around him, one of the best receiving corps in the league. It's the Bengals for me, but I have a feeling you're leaning in a different direction, Ross.
This is my favorite division this year to keep an eye on because I think this is going to be the most competitive division. I think this also is going to be the feistiest division.
It's a chippy division. I feel like
these teams are going to beat the shit out of each other all year long, man. This is going to be a really tough division because it's like, look, the most impressive team to me in the preseason was the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they might be the least favorite in the division right now. Maybe it's between them and the Browns, right? And I really like what the Ravens did. I like the fact that they I forget the offensive coordinator's name right now, but they got him from Georgia, and he's going to want to throw the football more with Lamar Jackson, which is why they got Zay Flowers, and they went out there and they got Odell Beckham Jr. We'll see what he's got left in the tank. Their defense is still solid. I know they brought in Jadeveon Clowney, right, to be a force on that line for them and kind of play some snaps. I lean Bengals right now. Just because they have the most talent from top to bottom on both sides, and also they're battle tested. Joe Burrow is I think Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the league right now, not named Patrick Mahomes. He'd be my second guy I would take right after Mahomes. So I'm going to lean for them, but I do think that the Steelers and the Ravens are going to make things interesting. And one of those teams, if not both of those teams, I think are going to make the playoffs. This feels like this could be a division where you can get 3 teams making the playoffs. I do think the Steelers are going to be a lot better. The only team I don't believe in is the Browns. I think Stefanski is on hot seat watch this year, and mostly because I think everything that Deshaun Watson went through, it just doesn't feel right anymore. And I'm going to keep all the off-field stuff away from everything. He didn't look comfortable last year. Granted, he missed a lot of time, stuff like that. It just wasn't quite the same. He still didn't look that good in preseason. I got to see it first from him and the rest of that Browns team before I think that they can contend with any of these guys. But, a lot of times when you go through these things, especially off field and stuff like that, you kind of lose a little bit of edge in what you might have had. Whatever he did off the field, maybe he's not allowed to do that anymore, and that has kind of taken away from his game, or just going through all that. He just didn't look right to me. And I would put him right now. He's the third best quarterback in that division. Obviously, I'm not going to put him ahead of Kenny Pickett. But I think the roster for the Steelers is much better than the roster for the Browns right now.
The roster for the Steelers is pretty loaded, and the only reason I wouldn't be picking, well, one of a few reasons I should say, picking the Steelers over these other teams is because of Kenny Pickett. And we'll see. It'd be nice. It'd be a nice story if you could see what he's able to do with some Pro Bowl talent around him, and Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. Everybody's favorite wide receiver of the league, I feel like, right now. But yeah, we like the Bengals here on Mac and Reed. On to the AFC South, and talking about the Texans, the Colts, the Jaguars, the Titans. This one's pretty fucking easy. I mean, you just got to be smoking crack, I feel like, if you really ride on the Colts and Titans and Texans in this division. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars, and what a solid team they've put together. They're a few years removed from when it was Blake Bortles and a really good defense around him that played in like an AFC Championship game. I know Ross and I were reminiscing about this the other day against Tom Brady's Patriots, but the Jaguars looking really good as a focus. Of course, the focus is on quarterback and scoring. And Trevor Lawrence, who's a very winning college quarterback, now he's really coming into his own as a professional quarterback at this point. And he's got weapons around him to boot. He's got Calvin Ridley now coming off his suspension, and he's healthy, and he looks like he could be a sneaky, really good wide receiver out there. You got Travis Etienne, have a good defense put together. Solid. I think they were about top 10 in points for last year. But you look at the three of the four teams in this division, winners aside, the Colts, Titans, and Texans just seem to be, trending towards the bottom of the league because they're rebuilding. And I love, obviously the signing of Anthony Richardson on the Colts and CJ Stroud. It'll be a while before hopefully these guys pan out. I know that you like Anthony Richardson, Ross, because of his ability to run and throw and his athleticism. He's probably going to get a lot of late game action throwing and a lot of red zone action running the ball as well. But it's got to be the Jaguars to win this division, right?
It is. My child is calling me.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% the Jaguars. That's the best team in the division. In fact, if you're feeling very spicy, you might throw a little bit on the Jaguars to go to the Super Bowl. Every now and then you might want to put one of those surprise teams out there to go to the Super Bowl. And I would sprinkle a little bit on the Jaguars to go there. The only team I can see maybe making things interesting, as my child's having a meltdown in the background, the only team that can maybe make things interesting in that division is the Titans, right? Because the Titans do have Derrick Henry still. They got a good running back. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins. Mike Vrabel's always going to have them play tough defense and good special teams and stuff like that. You just don't know what's going to happen with that quarterback situation. That's just the biggest thing. Is Ryan Tannehill going to be the guy? They're going to pass it on to Will Levis or Malik Willis or anything like that. But to me, it's Doug Peterson's going to take that team to the playoffs again. They're going to win that division. They're going to get a home game. And listen, they were not too far away from keeping that game interesting in the playoffs against the Chiefs last year. So I think that is a sneaky good team that a lot of people are sleeping on. We talked about the Eagles last year, kind of making that big jump. The Jaguars, keep an eye on them this year, especially if they can stay healthy.
They could be one of those powers of the AFC for sure. And yeah, touching on the Titans, I think that if Tannehill retains that starting spot and Derrick Henry plays like Derrick Henry has been, then they might challenge for the tops of that division again. And now that addition of DeAndre Hopkins is really good. You talked about Mike Vrabel leading this team, of course, a defensive-minded coach to be really competitive, in that category. So we shall see. But the Jaguars, look at Ross saying they could be a Super Bowl contender. I love it.
That's right.
AFC West, we got the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Chargers. And we know how just dismally bad that the Broncos were last year, the first year of Russell Wilson. It can't get any worse, right, Ross? Maybe. So the reigning champs, though, I think for good reason are my pick to win this division in the Kansas City Chiefs. They got the best quarterback in the league. They got the best tight end in the league, a Hall of Fame coach, and Andy Reid. Whenever they lose pieces, they seem to pick up right where they left off. Again, we know how bad the Broncos looked last year. The Raiders may turn some heads if Jimmy Garoppolo, can fit into that system nicely. It'll be interesting to see that connection and that offense. And you can't look past Justin Herbert, who's really talented, obviously out of LA. But Kansas City, they just look like a dynasty, right? And throughout this decade, the only thing that could really throw them off, you'd think, would be some major injury to certain key positions. The defense seems to weather the storm, but the offense just continues to put up points, and you get 3 touchdown performances out of Travis Kelce regularly. It's bananas. The Raiders, will challenge them in this division at times. I think I like how they're put together on both sides of the football. A pretty solid defense, and then Jimmy Garoppolo again finding a good home. I think leaving the Niners for the Raiders, but other moments. But KC, I think they find themselves at the top of that division, back in the conference championship game, if not the Super Bowl.
It's all KC. I think they're obviously the best team in that division, one of the best teams in football right now. They should be the favorites to, go back to the Super Bowl, at least in the AFC. I know the Eagles are the favorites right now to win the Super Bowl. I think every other team in that division is just, full-on pretenders. I don't believe in the Chargers. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in their head coach. I think that he should have been fired last year. And you got the Raiders, you got the Broncos. They've got quarterback issues. Even with Sean Payton there right now with the Broncos, I think Russell. They always say let Russell cook. I think he is cooked. I think he's probably done right now. And the Raiders, I think they'll be marginally better than they were last year, but. Jimmy G is still your quarterback. And, we've seen that movie before. How far is he going to be able to take you, especially in that division when you've got to go up against Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and stuff like that. So that is all Chiefs in that division. And I don't think any other team in that division even sniffs the playoffs. And that's Chargers included. I know that's a hot take, but I'm out on the Chargers. Until they replace that head coach, I'm out.
Very interesting. Not even a little enthusiasm with the Raiders. And now that Jimmy in for Derek Carr doesn't do anything for you, huh?
No,
seems like a downgrade.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Very interesting. I will, again, Kansas City or bust for sure. Now moving on to the NFC, Ross. We'll talk about the East with the Cowboys, Giants, Eagles, and Commanders. Eagles coming off that Super Bowl berth. They lost a close one to the Chiefs, who we just talked about at length. And, there's a theme for good reason with good offenses kind of running the league, if you will, and great quarterbacks elevating their teams. And Philly's no different with Jalen Hurts, I think, who has a ton of talent with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, Quez Watkins, good running backs behind him. They're coming off that disappointing Super Bowl loss, but it's a great learning experience from a guy who's played football at a high level for a long time. He knows the highs and the lows. And the Eagles got some serious help on defense in this offseason. They'll be as nasty as ever, if not better. The Cowboys, I think, could challenge, but it goes again back to quarterback play and Dak Prescott. We have to see how healthy he is. We have to see how well he plays. There's games where the Cowboys were able to put up 40-some points. And like another team that we'll talk about in the NFC North in a little bit, made the playoffs, but defense can only do so much, and then injuries pile up. Giants would be a close third. We know how bad Washington will likely be at the bottom of this division. I don't think the Giants, or obviously have made the big improvements to put them over the hump of winning this division. I know that obviously getting Darren Waller is nice help, but when he's your number one wide receiver for Daniel Jones, I'm not sure if that's gonna work for you. So it makes a lot of sense for me seeing Philly repeat as division champs and get back to the same success they had last year.
Completely agree. They are the most loaded team from top to bottom in the NFC. It's not even close. Jalen Hurts took a major step last year. He was even awesome in the Super Bowl game, right? He had a couple turnovers, but 3 rushing touchdowns. They are as complete as it gets. Their defense is nasty. Their front seven is nasty. My biggest concern with them, again, it's similar to the Chargers. I'm not all in on their coach. I think that he has been able to elevate. I think he had awesome coordinators and a great roster. He lost both coordinators this offseason, right? One is now the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. The other one is in that disaster of a situation in Arizona. But both those guys are gone now. So he's got to replace 2 coordinators. And he lost a little bit, a couple of guys on defense. He lost like a Miles Sanders on offense, stuff like that. But now it's all on him. Now you got the target on your back. You're not the surprise team anymore. Jalen Hurts is a $200 million quarterback now. Let's see how their coach and the rest of that team responds. They went and got a guy like Jalen Carter out there in the first round. It's going to be interesting to see how they respond with the target on their back. I still picked them to win that division. But that division is going to be a little bit more competitive too. I don't think the Eagles are going to go 14-3 like they did last year. I think they might be more like an 11-win team. And you might see the Cowboys. Cowboys still went 12-5 last year. They're a good team. I think the Giants could be a little bit better. And the Commanders, they're not going to stink. They're going to be feisty. They've got a decent team. Obviously they're starting a very young quarterback. The kid Sam Howell from North Carolina. We'll see how you do, but there's talent on that Commanders team. They've got a good defense. If they had a good quarterback, we'd be talking about them as an actual team that could compete for that division as well. But for now, it's the Eagles because they still have the most talent.
They do have talent on both sides of the roster. Good coaching in Sirianni, I got to think that Cowboys could be a dark horse team. It's every year I feel like we have that belief and that hope. I mean, certainly Cowboys fans have that hope that Dak Prescott can light it up because he's got CeeDee Lamb out there. And, Tony Pollard has stepped in nicely after Ezekiel Elliott waving goodbye to the Cowboys. And then the defense, how good Micah Parsons is, one of the best defensive players in the league. So there's optimism there. So it'll come down to those divisional games, right? And when they play those games, you could throw the overall record out for sure. But the Eagles Cowboys will be must-watch football. But I got to say that the Eagles look really good to repeat as division champs. Maybe not, 14 wins good, but they will be good again. On to the NFC North, our own NFC North, of course, with the Bears, the Lions, the Packers, the Vikings, and it's tough. On paper, it would be the Vikings, you would say, right? And like we just talked about with the Cowboys, this team had you scratching heads because you'd see Kirk Cousins and the team put up 30-some points and wins and look really sharp on both sides of the football. The production from Kirk Cousins is pretty consistent. You feel like there's a reason why the Vikings paid him that money, and they got the best wide receiver in the league and Justin Jefferson. You might put him 1A, 1B with Jamar Chase, but you can't deny how good he is. Again, looking at last season, it was the Vikings and how they played against tough competition. And in the NFC, the NFC North, that is, they played well against the Lions and the Bears and Green Bay. And, Lions' success hinges on Jared Goff, who's had that roller coaster career, a lot of nice weapons for him on offense. And you think that, that would potentially put them up to be in top competition for the NFC North. But I may be inherently biased here, but the Bears had a real big offseason, and they were in a lot of close games last year with a pretty different roster and a pretty shit defense, shit protection for Justin Fields. The improvements on the roster this year, you look at everything we talked about in the first half of the show as far as getting to this 53-man list and the starters that go out there, offensive weapons that are going to be supporting Justin Fields. You talk about the improvements that there will definitely be better pass rush than last year. You may lose Roquan Smith, but you get Tremaine Edmonds in there, who is an all-pro linebacker, we know. And, the Brisker question's out there, but you have a lot of help in secondary. And if that front seven performs well, it'll help the back four guys. I'm going to pick the Bears to win this division. I think the second team that will come close will be the Vikings. It'll be one of those two teams, but I like the Bears' chances for the North, as Cliff pointed out. That is wide open this year.
It really is, and this is a division that I have zero clue on. I want to punt on this question because I really feel like 8 and 9 can win this division. Like I don't feel comfortable about any of these teams right now picking them.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
Last year the Vikings won the division at 13-4. I don't think they're going to go 13-4 again this year. Everybody's betting on the Lions. Everybody thinks the Lions are going to go to the Super Bowl, which leads me to believe that they're going to have a massive hangover. They've got guys hurt, guys suspended. Like they're a little bit of a question mark as well. Obviously, we don't know what the Packers are going to be because we don't know where Jordan Love is going to be. And then we've got the Bears. Your heart says you want to pick the Bears, but I think mentally right now I'm going to lean towards the Vikings just because you've got the steady hand of Kirk Cousins. You have the best wide receiver in football right now, Justin Jefferson. And they were still able to keep Daniil Hunter. I know they lost a lot of guys, Adam Thielen and Harrison Smith. A lot of guys are gone. But, I think right now they've got the most blue chip guys in the division. And I think that you've got to rely on that. And that's where I start to have hangups about the Bears is I wish the Bears had more top end blue chip talent. And, you got guys like DJ Moore, Justin Fields, and Tremaine Edmonds. And there's a drop off after that, I think, on your roster. And you start having to factor in, is Jaquan Brisker one of those guys? Or is Eddie Jackson was still one of those guys? And can Darnell Mooney be that guy? And that's where I think the issue is. If the Bears had more dynamic blue chip athletes in the trenches on both sides of the ball, I think that they can and should win the division. But for right now, they've got the question marks. I'm going to lean Minnesota, but I don't feel good about any team in this division. It's going to be a slobber knocker, and it could be like an 8 and 9, 9 and whatever it is 17 games, 9 and 9 and 8, kind of situation,
Yeah, for sure. And Green Bay, we didn't talk about them at length, and I think obviously Jordan Love stepping has big shoes to fill, taking over for Aaron Rodgers, but played behind him. And Green Bay just has this mystique about them where they've been able to have their future franchise quarterback just waiting in the wings, waiting behind, Aaron Rodgers, waiting behind Brett Favre. So maybe we'll see after his success, Jordan Love step in and a different type of quarterback than Rodgers for sure, but probably picked up most of his good instincts, you would think. And then they got a great running back in Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon backing him up. Christian Watson, we know, was really good last year, as Desmond 1599 pointed out. And then the defense has been really good too, I would say. So it'll be a toss-up. It'll be one of those black and blue divisions for a good reason, for sure. We got to move on. Oh, go ahead, Ross.
I was going to say it's definitely going to be the team that beats up the most in the division that's probably going to win the division. And so that's something that the Bears have struggled with the past, is not winning those divisional games. Whoever wins most of their divisional games this year is obviously going to be the winner of that division. I know that sounds cliche and silly to say, but it's the truth.
No, it's absolutely the truth. And that's what gets you to the playoffs or dooms you. And the Bears had a lot of close, bad losses to divisional teams last year. I remember that much, that's for sure. On to the NFC South with the Falcons, the Panthers, the Saints, the Buccaneers. And this division, talk about ugly, this could be real ugly too. I think, Carolina rebuilding, Atlanta figuring out their direction as well. Marcus Mariota obviously wasn't it. Tampa not having Brady anymore. It's a big improvement for the guy who is the successor to Brady, if you will, with Baker Mayfield stepping into an offense that has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin out there. Even though they're a bit older, this defense has been really good in recent years too. But again, age plays a factor on that side of the football. I don't really trust Baker Mayfield enough to pick the Buccaneers. So, I'd love to see him prove me wrong and light it up. A guy who's one of the best college football players we've ever seen, but hasn't really captured that success in the NFL yet, but it's a toss-up between me for Tampa and then New Orleans. And you look at Derek Carr to have a nice rebirth in the Big Easy. Chris Olave was a great rookie sensation last year. You could have a great sophomore season, lots of targets. I like the Saints. I like that the way the roster is put together. I know that they'll be missing and albeit older Alvin Kamara for a little while there. And outside of Olave, there's not much help for Derek Carr. There's an older Michael Thomas, and then you'll see, Traquan Smith, younger guys like that. But defense, I think, has played historically well. So, I'm putting the Saints as the winner for the NFC South.
I am too. Begrudgingly, I think that Darren Carr needed a new place to go to. I think he's going to fit in well with that Saints situation. I still like their skill players more than anybody else in that division right now. I love Chris Olave. They're going to get Alvin Kamara back after this suspension situation, which I think actually could help him because I think he was really wearing down last year as the season went along. He's a little bit older now. They still have Cam Jordan on defense. They've got some fun guys on defense, and it's really tough to play in that dome still in New Orleans. And so I'm gonna pick them just because I don't trust a rookie quarterback situation in Carolina, especially behind that offensive line. I definitely don't trust Baker Mayfield. And, Desmond Ridder, I just don't think is any good. And again, this goes back to a similar, conversation we were having before with the Commanders. If the Falcons had a better quarterback, I actually might pick them to win that division because I love Bijan Robinson. I love, the tight end. I'm forgetting his name right now. Kyle Pitts. Yep. They drafted Drake London last year. They've got a pretty fun team too. I like Arthur Smith a lot as a play call and stuff like that. I just don't trust Desmond Ridder. So I have to lean to the Saints.
Fair enough with you there. And finally, the NFC West that features, of course, the Cardinals, the Rams, the Niners, and the Seahawks. And for me, it's between the Niners and the Seahawks. And I'm going to give the Niners the edge here. It's very tough, and this is a great division, I think, in football year after year. Brock Purdy was a great story last year. We'll see if he can carry over that sort of Cinderella story, and now he has obviously this whole offseason to prepare, and Sam Darnold challenging him. He'll see if he's really the best choice. We'll see if he's really the best choice at quarterback for the team going forward. And it helps that he has a ton of weapons, obviously, with Kittle and Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel over there as well. So Sam Darnold's ready in case he shits the bed now that Trey Lance is gone, which is just a crazy saga that we didn't discuss in itself. It was a very odd move, but you weren't really using him. But Geno Smith, with finding a new rebirth of his own this last season with the Seahawks, he was a good story last year. And the wide receiver core is as good as any. Seahawks still pretty competitive under Pete Carroll, right? And I think the addition of Jackson Smith and Jigba is really great too. But I'm going to give the 49ers an edge. I think that defense is slightly better, and that will be a difference to edge out the Seahawks in the division.
Completely agree. Again, talk about blue chip athletes out there. And, yes, you can say what you say about Brock Purdy, but the 49ers have the most blue chip athletes out of anybody in that division. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Joey Bosa's on that team. Fred Warner's on that football team. They are loaded, on that football team with really top-end talent. Right. Trent Williams is the best left tackle in football, right? That's what I'm talking about, where you're talking about top-end talent. And all Brock Purdy has to do is just be an average at best point guard. That's all he has to do. Just be like Scott Skiles out there and just kind of like, back when Scott Skiles was just feeding Shaquille O'Neal as a rookie and stuff like that. And so the 49ers certainly have the most talent. I picked them to win that division. I like Seattle a lot, though. I like Seattle. I like that Jackson Smith and Jigma is going to be there. I know he's going to miss a little bit of time with that wrist injury, but not too much time. And I love the Geno Smith resurgence. Kenneth Walker Jr. is also a fun running back, and they got a fun defense. A lot of young guys in that secondary, but I still lean towards the 49ers. And for them, it's still Super Bowl or bust this year, regardless of who's going to be playing quarterback for them. They got to go to that Super Bowl again this year. They lost obviously Purdy last year to injury, and they lost a backup to him in that game, and that created this whole new rule this year about dressing three quarterbacks, on your 53-man roster. That's basically the Brock Purdy rule. But I like the 49ers a lot to still win that division.
What a fall from grace for the teams we didn't mention too, and the Cardinals and the Rams. But that's all we really need to say about that, especially with their quarterback situations. Outside of that, we've run out of time, run out of show. Thanks to everybody for watching, listening in on the Barroom Network channel here on YouTube, of course. Remember, like, subscribe, tell a friend or two. If you've missed this or any of our previous episodes, there on Spotify, iTunes, on YouTube. And you can follow me at 311Mac on Twitter. Follow Ross at Ross Reed. Everybody be good to each other out there. Football is almost upon us. Same time next week.
Yes, sir.
And now, of course, we say so long, everybody.
Peace.